Today I pray 5 times a day facing Mecca, wear hijab with pride, and find in Allah the peace I searched for my entire life. But 3 years ago, I was one of the most Islamophobic people you could ever meet. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 49 years old and have been a Delta Airlines pilot for 15 years. And when I learned I would be flying with a Muslim flight attendant, I almost refused to enter the cockpit. That stormy October night, flying from Los Angeles to Kuala Lumpur, with 298 lives in my hands, I never imagined that a prayer in Arabic would save not only all of us, but also my lost soul. What happened to HE 35,000 feet changed everything I believed about God, about faith, and about who I really was. This is the most incredible story of my life, and perhaps the most important one you've ever heard. Before continuing with my account, write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know which country the story is reaching, and if you've ever had an experience that completely changed your beliefs. Your interaction is very important to me, as it shows me how Allah is using this story to touch hearts around the world. I grew up in a completely secular family in Denver, Colorado. My parents were university professors who taught me from an early age to trust only in science and logic. Religion is for weak people who need emotional crutches. My father used to say, this mentality shaped my worldview for decades. My passion for aviation began at age 8, when I saw a Boeing 747 take off from Denver Airport. Something in that moment awakened an inexplicable fascination with the skies. I studied aeronautical engineering, graduated among the best in my class, and at 25, I was already a Delta Airlines co. My life was perfect on paper, brilliant career, excellent salary, professional recognition. But after the September 11, 2001 attacks, when I was 19 and just starting my aviation career, something drastically changed in me. Fear transformed into pure prejudice. I associated any Islamic symbol with imminent danger. I'd see a woman in hijab at the airport and my stomach would turn. I'd hear someone speaking Arabic and feel inexplicable anxiety. During 15 years of my career, I avoided flights to Muslim-majority countries as much as possible. My colleagues even joked that I had a blacklist of destinations. When I couldn't avoid them, I'd spend the entire flight on high alert, interpreting any suspicious movement as a potential threat. It was a sick way to live, but I couldn't free myself from these deeply rooted prejudices. In October 2023, Delta assigned me to a flight I couldn't refuse, and that would change my life in a way I never imagined possible. It was an ordinary Monday when the flight supervisor called me into his office. Sarah, you'll be commanding Flight 2852 Kuala Lumpur on Thursday. Premium International Route Experienced Crew. My heart raced. Kuala Lumpur meant Malaysia, a Muslim-majority country I had avoided throughout my entire career. The cabin chief will be Amina al-Rashid, he continued, handing me the crew documents. When I got home and researched Amina, I saw her official photo, a woman of about 35, professional smile, wearing an impeccable navy blue hijab. I felt that familiar cold in my stomach, that anxiety that had accompanied me for years whenever I encountered symbols of Islam. I spent the entire night thinking about how I could get out of that flight. I considered claiming illness, family problems, anything that would allow me to escape this situation. But it was a Boeing 777-300E, my favorite aircraft for long flights, on a route that represented a major step in my career. Canceling would mean losing a unique opportunity and possibly damaging my professional reputation. On Tuesday, I gathered courage and called a pilot friend. Lisa, have you ever flown with Muslim crew? She laughed. Sarah, what a strange question. Of course, several times. They're excellent professionals. Why do you ask? I didn't have the courage to admit my prejudices. Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining negative scenarios, conflict situations, communication problems. My rational mind knew my fears were unfounded, but my heart was dominated by years of unresolved prejudice. I had no idea I was about to meet two of the most important people in my life, and that one of them would be a 68-year-old gentleman who would pray for the most inexplicable miracle I've ever witnessed in the skies. Thursday, October 28th, 6:30 a.m. at Los Angeles International Airport. I arrived 2 hours before the briefing, purposely early to assess the situation and mentally prepare for what I considered a challenge. I saw Amina, from afar, walking down the crew corridor. Navy blue hijab, perfectly adjusted, impeccable Delta uniform, erect and confident posture. My prejudice automatically whispered, how can she work in aviation wearing that on her head? But when our eyes met, I smiled. There was something in her eyes, a deep serenity, a genuine peace, that bothered me in a strange way, as if challenging everything I believed about people like her. Good morning, Captain Mitchell, she said, extending her hand with a warm smile. I'm Amina al-Rashid, cabin chief. It's an honor to fly with you. Her voice had a soft accent, but her English was perfect. The handshake was firm, professional, confident. For a moment, I felt ashamed of my prejudices, but quickly suppressed that feeling. During the safety briefing, I met the rest of the crew, 8 experienced flight attendants of different nationalities, all speaking about Amina with genuine respect and admiration. She's one of the best, whispered James, Michael. I've flown with her 3 times, extremely competent and always calm under pressure. That's when I met Mr. Hassan Al-Mahoud, 68 years old, one of the first-class passengers. It wasn't common to meet passengers before the flight, but he had requested a special conversation due to medical needs related to his age. He was a distinguished-looking gentleman, well-groomed gray beard, kind eyes that conveyed wisdom accumulated over decades. Captain Sarah, he said with a soft Arabic accent, I'm making my pilgrimage to Mecca. This flight is very special to me. There was something different about him, an inner peace, a tranquility I had never seen in anyone. When Amina greeted him in Arabic, he smiled as if she were family, responding with words I didn't understand, but which sounded musical, almost hypnotic. I felt out of place, a stranger observing a cultural and spiritual connection I didn't understand. I still didn't know that in a few hours, these 2 strangers would be praying for my life and the lives of everyone, starring in the most inexplicable miracle of my career. We took off at 11:45 a.m. local time with 298 souls aboard. Los Angeles had clear skies, favorable wind, absolutely perfect conditions for flight. The takeoff was smooth as silk, and during the first hour, everything proceeded normally. I even started to relax, thinking maybe my fears really were unfounded. But soon after, we crossed the California coast and entered over the Pacific Ocean. The navigation system began showing inconsistent readings, small discrepancies that an experienced pilot notices immediately. My co-pilot, James, a 20-year veteran, frowned, looking at the instruments. Sarah, this isn't normal, he said, pointing to the primary GPS showing slightly different coordinates from the backup system. Half a degree difference in position reading. It was just the beginning. A seemingly minor anomaly that would reveal itself as the first sign of something much bigger and more dangerous awaiting us. In 2 hours, we would face the most violent storm of my career. All systems would fail simultaneously, and I would discover that there exists something far beyond science and technology that governs the skies. But first, I would need to confront my own prejudices in a way I never imagined possible. 3 hours and 15 minutes into the flight over the infinite waters of the Pacific Ocean. We were maintaining cruise altitude at 41,000 feet, constant speed of Mach 0.84, following our planned route perfectly when something impossible appeared on our weather radar. It was a storm formation that simply shouldn't exist. Massive, violent, extending for hundreds of nautical miles in all directions, with cumulonimbus towers rising to altitudes that defied the laws of atmospheric physics. The most disturbing part, this formation wasn't on any of the 5 different weather reports we had received that morning. I checked the instruments 3 times. The weather radar was working perfectly, but showed a wall of intense red indicating severe storm activity directly in our route where there should have been only clear sky. Oceanic Control Center. This is Delta 285. I transmitted via HF radio, trying to keep my voice professional despite growing concern. We're detecting a massive storm formation at coordinates 45 N 165 W. That doesn't appear in our weather reports. Requesting confirmation and possible alternate route, the response came after a long pause, loaded with confusion. Delta Duzentas EO 85. Our ground radars and weather satellites show no significant activity in your current area. Atmospheric data indicates normal conditions for flight, maintained programmed course and altitude. But there it was, growing on the horizon ahead of us like a black mountain against the evening sky. a solid wall of storm clouds extending from the ocean surface to impossible altitude, easily exceeding 60,000 feet. Lightning danced within the dark mass like serpents of light, visible even from 200 nautical miles away. It was meteorologically impossible. Storms of this magnitude don't form spontaneously in a matter of hours without advanced signs in atmospheric models. They don't arise from nothing over calm oceans, and they definitely don't grow to altitudes that our Boeing 777 couldn't fly over. James, I said to my co-pilot, I've never seen anything like this in 50. Let's try to go around to the east. When I started entering an alternate route into the flight management system, everything began going wrong simultaneously. The autopilot disengaged abruptly, without warning, forcing me to take manual. Alert lights began flashing in cascade across the instrument panel like crazy Christmas lights. Primary hydraulic system showing irregular pressure, James announced, his voice revealing the first note of real concern. Backup A also showing anomalies. The communication radio developed severe interference, transforming the clear voice of control into broken static. The transponder began sending erratic codes. Even the primary GPS started showing coordinates inconsistent with the backup system. Sarah, in 20 years of commercial flying, I've never seen so many simultaneous failures without apparent cause, James said, quickly flipping through emergency procedure manual. His voice was controlled, but I'd known James for 5 years. I saw the slight tremor in his hands when he adjusted his glasses. It's as if all electronic systems are being affected by some massive external interference. I maintained the external posture of absolute calm that every captain must demonstrate: relaxed shoulders, firm voice, deliberate and precise movements on the controls. But internally, for the first time in 15 years of flying commercial aircraft, I felt the metallic, bitter taste of genuine fear filling my mouth. It wasn't normal nervousness before a difficult situation. It wasn't the stimulating adrenaline that accompanies complex technical emergency. It was something much more primitive and disturbing, the visceral recognition that we were entering completely unknown territory, beyond any control or understanding I possessed. It was as if the very air around us had become our enemy, as if invisible and incomprehensible forces were deliberately testing my absolute confidence in technology, in science, and in the supremacy of human reason over natural chaos. During my years of training, I studied countless air accidents, analyzed system failures, memorized procedures for any imaginable emergency, but nothing in all my technical education had prepared me to face the impossible. The storm swallowed us with a violence that defied anything I knew about meteorology, atmospheric physics, or the limits of what nature could inflict on an aircraft. It wasn't a gradual entry into a turbulence zone, as flight manuals describe. It was like colliding against a solid wall of pure atmospheric chaos. One moment we were flying in calm air under stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. The next, we were thrown into a cauldron of meteorological fury that seemed to have been created specifically to destroy us. Lightning struck our Boeing 777 repeatedly, not the quick, harmless touches that aircraft normally experience, but prolonged and violent discharges that created blinding flashes, illuminating the entire cabin for entire seconds. The smell of burned ozone penetrated even the pressurized ventilation system. The turbulence was beyond any classification I knew. It wasn't severe. It was violent, apocalyptic, throwing our 240,000 kilograms of aircraft as if we were a paper toy in the hands of a fish child. G-forces alternated between +3 and -2 in a matter of seconds, pressing our bodies against the seats and then suspending us against the seatbelts. Behind us, in the passenger cabin, I could hear screams of absolute terror. Carry-on luggage flew through the aisles like projectiles. Flight attendants, including Amina, grabbed onto whatever they could, struggling to reach injured passengers while being thrown against walls and ceiling. But the worst was yet to come. All backup systems began failing in perfect sequence, like electronic dominoes falling in cascade. Inertial navigation system, offline. Satellite communications, dead. Primary and backup GPS, no signal. Fly-by-wire, flight controls, unresponsive. Even basic instruments for altitude, speed, and flight attitude began showing completely erratic readings. Mayday, mayday, mayday. I transmitted through what remained of the radio system, my voice fighting against the growing static. Delta 285 declaring emergency. Multiple catastrophic system failures, severe storm, losing aircraft control, need immediate assistance for emergency landing. Only white static responded. We were completely alone. 298 souls lost over the infinite Pacific, facing forces that were far beyond anything we had been trained for. It was in this moment of most absolute despair, when my confidence in technology and science had been completely destroyed, that I heard something that would change not just the course of that terrible night, but my entire life forever. Through the intercom that had been left open accidentally due to the multiple electrical failures, I heard human voices cutting through the deafening roar of the storm, but they weren't screams of panic or cries for help. They were calm, melodious, serene voices, reciting rhythmic words in Arabic. Amina and Mr. Hassan had begun praying together, their voices uniting in a spiritual harmony that contrasted in an almost supernatural way with the violent chaos around us. It was as if there existed a bubble of absolute peace in the exact center of the hurricane, and this bubble was being created, sustained, expanded by those ancient words in a language I didn't understand, but which touched something so deep in my soul that tears began flowing down my face without me realizing it. And what happened in the next 3 minutes would defy everything I believed about reality, about science, about what is possible in this universe, and about who really controls the skies. While Amina and Mr. Hassan prayed, their voices uniting in a spiritual harmony that seemed to echo throughout the entire aircraft, something completely impossible began to happen. The storm, which had covered at least 200 nautical miles and rose to 50,000 feet in altitude, simply began to disappear. It didn't gradually diminish. It didn't slowly dissipate as normal storms do. It disappeared in a matter of seconds, as if someone had flipped a giant switch in the sky. We were flying through a perfectly clear night under a blanket of stars that sparkled like diamonds on black velvet. "Sarah, this is scientifically impossible," James whispered, checking the weather radars 3 consecutive times. "Where's the storm? How do 200 nautical miles of severe atmospheric activity simply disappear in seconds?" All systems returned to perfect functioning simultaneously. Navigation, online, communications, crystal clear. Flight controls, responding normally. It was as if someone had pressed a reset button, not just on our equipment, but on reality itself around us. I was trembling, but not from fear. It was something much deeper and more disturbing. It was the tremor of someone who had just witnessed something that defied everything they believed about how the world works. My rational mind struggled desperately to find a scientific explanation, but there was none. On the intercom, I could still hear Amina and Mr. Hassan concluding their prayers with soft words that sounded like gratitude. Passengers began applauding, thinking I had gotten us out of this situation through my skill as a pilot. They didn't know, and I wasn't ready to admit that our salvation had come from a completely different source. For the first time in my adult life, my unshakable faith in the supremacy of science and technology had met its absolute limit. I activated the autopilot and remained silent for 20 long minutes, trying to process what we had just witnessed. 15 years of experience in commercial aviation, training in aeronautical engineering, deep knowledge of meteorology, atmospheric physics, and aeronautical systems, nothing in all my training and education explained what we had experienced. James broke the silence. "Sarah, I'll write the incident report. But how will I explain this? Massive storm disappeared instantly during Muslim prayer aboard? They'll think we've gone mad." The black box recording would become a mystery for civil aviation investigators. It would clearly document the multiple system failures, the extreme weather conditions, and then the sudden and inexplicable normalization of everything. But it wouldn't capture the element that I knew, deep in my heart, had been the true cause of our salvation. I looked through the cockpit windows at that impossible sky, stars shining where minutes before there had been a storm that could have destroyed our aircraft. For the first time in 42 years of life, I felt my intellectual arrogance being confronted by something much greater than my limited understanding of existence. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because it meant I had no real control over anything, no matter how much technology and science made me believe I did. Liberating because it meant that perhaps there existed something greater, more powerful, and more merciful than I had ever imagined. For the first time in my life, I felt genuine curiosity about those prayers that had coincided with that God caused our miraculous salvation. During the remaining 8 hours of the flight to Kuala Lumpur, my mind couldn't find rest even for a second. Each time I tried to focus on normal flight procedures, checking instruments, monitoring fuel consumption, communicating with control centers, my thoughts obsessively returned to those 3 impossible minutes when our reality had been completely James tried several times to start conversations about other subjects, but I responded monosyllabically, lost in an internal whirlwind of questions that challenged everything I had believed during 42 years of existence. As a person who had built her entire identity on scientific and rationalist foundations, I was experiencing something equivalent to an existential earthquake. Flight mechanics I knew perfectly, but mechanics of miracles that was completely outside my personal operations manual. I mentally reviewed every detail of what had happened, desperately searching for some logical explanation that could restore my sense of control over reality. Perhaps we had flown through the edge of a storm that was naturally dissipating. Perhaps the instruments had shown false readings due to electromagnetic interference. Perhaps my perception of time had been distorted by extreme stress. But no matter how much my rational mind struggled to find conventional explanations, a deeper part of me, a part I didn't even know existed, whispered a truth I wasn't yet ready to fully admit. What we had experienced was beyond any natural explanation. When Amina came to the cockpit for the landing briefing, 40 minutes before we arrived in Kuala Lumpur, something fundamental had changed in how I perceived her. For the first time since we met, I didn't see her through the distorted filters of prejudice and fear. She was no longer a potential threat or a stranger representing a culture I didn't understand. She was a person who possessed something I didn't understand, but which was clearly real, powerful, and perhaps most importantly, benevolent. There was something in her eyes, a deep and unshakable peace that contrasted dramatically with the emotional turbulence I was experiencing internally. "Amina," I said hesitantly, my voice betraying a vulnerability I rarely allowed others to perceive. "During the storm, you were praying, weren't you?" She smiled, and in that smile was a gentleness, so genuine, so free of judgment or condescension, that it completely disarmed all the emotional defenses I had built over years of prejudice. "Yes, Captain Sarah, when situations are completely beyond our human control, we naturally turn to Allah, the one who has absolute control over all things that exist. But you didn't seem afraid," I continued, remembering the almost supernatural serenity I had perceived in their voices during the chaos. "How can you have such confidence when everything is falling apart around you?" Amina reflected for a moment before answering, as if carefully choosing words for a conversation she perceived to be profoundly important. "Faith in Allah doesn't eliminate difficulties, challenges, or even the real dangers we face in life," she explained patiently, her voice carrying wisdom that transcended her apparent age. "But it gives us an unshakable inner strength to face any situation with serenity, because we know that everything, absolutely everything, is in Allah's hands, and that He is Ar-Rahman, the most merciful of all the merciful." Her words touched something deep within me. Throughout my life, I had carried the crushing weight of trying to control everything around me. As a pilot, as a daughter, as a person, I always felt it was my exclusive responsibility to manage every variable, predict every problem, have a solution for every emergency. It was an exhausting way to live, but it was the only one I knew. The idea that there could exist something greater and wiser than me, something I could trust completely, was simultaneously terrifying and incredibly attractive. During our 4-hour layover in Kuala Lumpur, while the aircraft was refueled and inspected, I sought out Mr. Hassan in the elegant first-class lounge. I found him sitting calmly in a leather armchair, reading a book I immediately recognized as the Quran. There was an aura of tranquility around him that seemed almost tangible. "Mr. Hassan," I said, approaching nervously, my hands trembling slightly, "may I ask a question about what happened during our flight?" He raised his kind eyes and smiled with a paternal warmth that made me feel instantly safe. "Of course, Captain Sarah. Please, sit with me." I settled into the armchair beside him, feeling strangely like a child about to ask a very important question to a wise grandfather. "The prayers you made during the storm... I hesitated, searching for the right word. "They really made a difference, didn't they?" "It wasn't coincidence, was it? Mr. Hassan carefully closed the Quran, placing a hand-embroidered bookmark, and turned to look directly into my eyes. There were decades of accumulated wisdom in that gaze, but also infinite compassion. Captain Sarah, throughout my 68 years in this world, I've learned that Allah guides whom He wills, when He wills, in the way He said, His voice carrying the gentle weight of lived experience. Perhaps today He guided much more than just our plane through that impossible storm. Perhaps He also guided your brave heart to begin asking exactly the right question. His words echoed in my heart in a way that completely transcended my rational understanding. It was as if each word was a key opening internal locks I didn't even know existed. I felt unexpected tears filling my eyes, not tears of fear, sadness, or frustration, but of something I couldn't name or categorize. It was as if a massive door that had been locked, barricaded, and forgotten throughout my entire adult life was beginning to open slowly, allowing golden, warm light to begin filtering through the cracks. For the first time in 42 years of existence, I admitted to myself, really admitted, not just intellectually considered, that perhaps there was something infinitely greater, wiser, more powerful, and more loving than my limited and arrogant understanding of how the universe worked. And perhaps, just perhaps, this something had been patiently trying to communicate with me throughout my entire life, sending subtle and not so subtle signals, but I had been too proud, blind, and deaf to perceive or listen. The seed of a transformation that would change everything had been planted, and it was beginning to germinate in fertile soil I didn't even know existed within my heart. If this story is touching your heart as it touched mine that night over the Pacific, if you feel Allah might be speaking to you through this testimony of transformation, consider leaving a super thanks. It's a form of financial contribution that helps me continue producing and sharing these conversion stories that can change lives forever. Each contribution, no matter the amount, is a way for you to actively participate in this mission of bringing hope and faith to hearts that, like mine, may be lost in the darkness of materialism and prejudice. Your generosity allows me to dedicate time to research, produce, and share these testimonies that Allah uses to touch souls around the world. This was just the first part of my transformation journey. What happened in the following weeks, how I studied Islam, how I faced my family's resistance, how my career was affected, and the other miracles I witnessed, all of this is in the continuation of this incredible story. But now I need your help to carry this message forward. Share this video in your WhatsApp groups, on your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, with your family, friends, and colleagues. Someone in your network needs to hear today how Allah can transform the most closed, most prejudiced, most distant heart from Him. Maybe it's someone who, like me, grew up believing that religion is for weak. Maybe it's someone who carries prejudices about Islam. Maybe it's someone who is searching for answers to the existential void I felt before finding true faith. Together, we can be instruments of Allah to carry this message of hope, transformation, and divine love to every corner of the continuation of this story is in the next video. Click the bell to receive notifications. And don't miss how an Islamophobic pilot became a practicing Muslim who found in Allah the peace she searched for her entire life. May Allah bless all of you, and may this story be the beginning of a transformation in the life of whoever's watching as well.